My guest is a musician, poet, raconteur and songwriter. According to author Ian Rankin, he is Scotland's Bob Dylan. He's been described as a cocktail of Van Morrison, Nick Drake and Irvine Welsh. The music critic for The Telegraph claims that Gypsy Blood by his 1970s band Doll by Doll is the lost masterpiece of British rock by the greatest band you've never heard of. He's produced around 30 well-received albums, yet worldwide fame has eluded him. What's certain is that he's unlikely to run out of ideas. The most recent album is called Gothic Road, and he's walked, to say the least, a rough and challenging road, led an eventful life and against the odds survived to plunder its joys and depths for our edification.
A perfect summation, Edie.
It was the time of spring and song. The lilac had already been and gone. I had just returned from walking by the sounding sea. I came back to the hotel where you turned and said to me, white bars of heaven keeping me from you.
Jackie Leven, you've been making music all your life. You're 60 now.
Mm-hmm.
You released your first album, Control, when you were 21. What is your own explanation for someone as prolific and critically esteemed as you are, not having hit the big time?
I think it's something in my personal hard wiring that I don't understand. If I did understand, I might be a lesser writer. Things like psychotherapy and psychoanalysis are things I've resisted in my life because I have a superstitious concern that if I understood that bit, then what's good about the writing would go away. So that's the price I've paid.
So what's that, the necessary angst of the artist?
I'm not sure if I'd put it in those terms, but I'm happy to accept that.
Wouldn't you like to be rich and famous, though?
Sometimes, yeah, when I get my council tax bill and I think, how the hell am I going to pay this? And then they send me the red one, I think, I've really got to sort this out before I get much older. But a more significant part of me refuses to worry in a terminal way about it.
Cult status, though, is much cooler than fame.
Well, some of the critics would contend that I don't even have cult status. When you see it applied to people, I kind of think, what do they mean by that? And I think it just comes down to a success thing, doesn't it?
Well, it means that you're good, but there's only so many recognise you as such. And it possibly means that once you pop your clogs, you'll become very famous then.
I always think that. I always think when I die, it's going to be absolutely brilliant. So I kind of have fantasies about how great it's going to be. But I'm sure we all do. I don't know about you, Edie, but I often fantasise about my funeral and the jokes people would make, the nice things they'd say about me. And that's an important fantasy for me.
And do you think you'll be witnessing it from on high?
No, I don't, which is why I'm sort of luxuriating in it now.
As we'll hear later, Jackie Leven, you have survived attempted murder, heroin addiction. If your writing is to be believed, you've also considered suicide. And yet you are great fun to be with. You make people laugh. Are you a walking contradiction?
Yeah, I hope so. I like people that are walking contradictions. All the people that I'm friends with, I find highly contradictory. I don't search them out to be that way, but I enjoy their contrariness. There's a wonderful French writer called Anna Kavan, and she said a simple thing, which is life is tension or the result of tension. I think that it's important to keep tension in your personality.
You grew up in Fife, was it Glenrothes?
Glenrothes, yeah. But not initially. We lived in Leslie, then moved to Glenrothes.
On your website, you say that you never felt that you belonged. Why was that?
My parents weren't from Fife, and in Leslie we really stuck out a lot in the 50s and 60s. Once we got into the melting pot that is Glenrothes, it was a bit different because most people were in the same boat, although as time went on it also became clear, even in Glenrothes, that we were a kind of different sort of family.
Your mum was a Geordie. Where was your dad from?
My dad was an Irish Cockney, and my mum wasn't just a Geordie but a Romany. My mum was very into black American blues. She had lots of old vinyl records of people like Big Bill Broonzy and Lightning Hopkins. When everyone else was listening to Elvis Presley singing Wooden Heart in their houses, loads of kids would want to come round to my house just so they could hear stuff like this Big Bill Broonzy style stuff. And it took me a moment in my life to understand that it was because it was highly unusual.
The Doll by Doll album's called Gypsy Blood. Is that a reference to your Romany heritage?
It is, because it was something that I suppressed my own feelings, comprehension and understanding of when I was younger, possibly as a survival tactic. Then when I was being a kind of wild character in a very wild band, I suddenly had a burst of pride and largesse about all of that. So that was a good fun album to make.
Did your mum tell you much about her having this Romany gypsy background?
No, not at all. It was only after the death of my father that she began to really want to talk about all of that. And in fact, I didn't really understand very much about my dad and his background. I remember on his deathbed, because I'd always thought of him as being a real Londoner kind of guy, he suddenly sang the entirety of the Irish Washerwoman, and I was completely taken aback, because it's not the sort of thing that you would conceivably learn unless it was redolent of fundamentally where you came from.
So do you think your parents had some sense of shame about where they came from?
I'm not sure if it's so much shame as there's an idea that love, I think it's a Jungian idea, a wonderful phrase which was matching psychic disturbance, which you said that was a way you could look at love. And I've come to think that this is an appropriate expression for my own parents, in that there's a lot that was unspoken in our family. My better half, Deborah, she's got a very close family. To me, it's like suddenly living in Gavin and Stacey, they're so close. But my family were always disparate, and, you know, like I've got a brother and sister who I really, really love, but would we send each other a birthday card or a Christmas card? No, we wouldn't in a million years.
You used to, according to Debbie, just go off and sleep under hedgerows, and there were times that you just couldn't handle life. You'd have to go off on your own, like a gypsy.
Yeah, I love it, even though it's very hard work. I mean, it's spring's cold, and the kind of place I like to go and sort of be on my own is particularly West Dorset. But in March, West Dorset in the rain is a very, very cold and challenging environment. But I kind of love it, and it's important for me. When I was young, I used to play truant a lot from school. I mean, when I was really young. And so it became important to me to be out in nature. And I spent lots and lots of days kind of in silence on my own. And then I'd go home, and I remember my mum would say, "Hello, darling, didn't go to school today?" And I said, "I did." She said, "I don't think you did. Where have you been?" But she was never heavy with me about it. I think
Maybe she understood.
I think she did understand. It was a very important thing, which even now, to this day, I seem to have to replicate.
Well, I mean, that was the saying, wasn't it? When spring came along and the yellow was on the broom, that's when people started to travel again.
Yeah.
Did you get on with other kids your age?
Yes, I did. Possibly not consistently, but I certainly had friends. And I would say they probably were very good friends, because being friends with me had a price, which was that you were being friends with the weird guy.
What made you the weird guy?
Once again, it comes back to me not entirely understanding, because I was working like hell to fit in, but because I didn't know why I was the weird guy, it was a hopeless task.
You're a big guy now. Were you big then?
No, I was a kind of skinny, meaningless kid, only got bigger in later life, so I didn't have physical presence.
But you were a kid who liked poetry.
Yeah.
Well, that might have made you a bit weird to some of your contemporaries.
It may well have done. I started spending more and more time in the school library, and there was a wonderful old woman librarian there who took a shine to me, decided I was an okay kid, and so she started putting lots and lots of literature that most people wouldn't see my way, and pointing out especially lots of Russian and American poetry. And because I wasn't being force-fed it in like English lessons and stuff, I was really able to assimilate it and see what she meant about what was good and stuff. So I really began a kind of quest and a line of inquiry at an early age, which was more important to me, perhaps, than anything else, and actually remains the most important thing in my life.
You picked up a guitar at some point, obviously, because you are a fantastic guitarist. You were never taught. Apparently, you don't even have the normal tuning of a guitar to this day.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. No, I can't do that. Yeah, my dad used to say this thing to provoke us. He used to say, some people like music, I don't. It's as simple as that. But I was amazed on my 13th birthday. He said, what do you want? And I said, I'd like a guitar. And he just took me immediately to the wee arcade in Kirkcaldy and just said, well, choose one. So, although I often think, he took me out of art class when I was doing my lowers and made me go into shorthand typing. That's how much he wanted me not to be in the arty world. So I was amazed when he did do this buying the guitar thing.
Was that a way of getting at your mother when he said, some people like music, I don't, when you just told me that she was somebody who liked black blues singers?
I would say it possibly was, but I think he had a sense of humour about it. I don't ever remember him being heavy about it, because there was a very funny thing he used to say. Sometimes he'd come home and there'd be someone like Lightning Hopkins on our funny little sound system. And he'd say, why is it whenever I come home there's black men shouting in my house? And it was a genuinely amusing thing to say and made us all laugh.
Did he ever shout in the house?
Yeah, he could get quite shouty and quite kind of aggressive, I suppose. He wasn't a brutal guy at all, but I think he just lost his cool in quite a spectacular way, which I can do myself, I have to say.
Well, you're renowned for, certainly in your younger years, for
Yeah.
having a massively wild temper.
Yeah, and I still can do, but as my better half Debbie has observed, noted and acted accordingly, if I'm just allowed to get on with it, it's over in no time at all. And I do apologise, and it's not like anyone gets hurt or anything, I just need to erupt.
We talked about your band Doll by Doll, which was very successful in the 70s. Neil McCormick, the critic from The Telegraph that I mentioned at the beginning of the programme, later on in one of his articles says that Doll by Doll, much as he admires them and thinks that, you know, they were the greatest band that nobody's ever heard of, says that also you were a quite terrifying group, a swaggering bunch of hard-drinking, drug-taking, borderline psychotics who revelled in their otherness. True, false, exaggeration?
I think that's very accurate. It's a good overall picture.
Was that also an attraction of psychic disturbances? Like you said, your
Yes,
parents
I would say it was, yeah. I mean, I'm still great friends with all the guys who are still alive from the band. We're still like soul brothers in a big way.
So how did you get together?
We met when we were all squatting in different farmhouses in Dorset.
This is after you'd left Fife.
Oh yeah, a long time. By that time I'd lived in Spain and I'd lived in Berlin twice.
Having escaped a gang in Fife, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. I got picked on by a gang in Glenrothes. That was when I just left school. The main guy, who I will not name, he was a very unusual character. They chased me relentlessly at night. In the daytime, if I saw him, he'd say things like, we nearly caught you last night. And he said, do you want to go for a drink? So I'd say, I've got no money. He'd say, oh, come on, I'll lend you a fiver. So he was very friendly in this ostensible way in the daytime, but at night it was deadly serious. And in fact, it was what made me leave Scotland. I just thought, I can't go on living like this, because I couldn't even get in and out of work.
Sounds to me like he might have fancied you.
Yeah, that's quite possible. I could understand anyone fancying me in those days.
So you got together eventually with this bunch of borderline psychotics to form the band Doll by Doll. You lived in some pretty dodgy accommodation in London, weren't you, squatting in what was known as the Bristol Gardens?
Bristol Gardens, yeah, which was dominated by a lot of very damaged Scots guys who had been through gang systems in Scotland, but were kind of better people in that. In many ways, they had a lot going for them, and I really liked them, and I'm still friends with a lot of those guys as well. So it was.
But why were you attracted to these people on the margins of society?
They were extremely good at stealing alcohol. Sometimes they'd come back with like a crate of Woods 100 Navy rum. And because we were all there in the pub, we'd all get a bottle. And this was kind of important to us as deeply committed, fashionable, reckless drinkers of alcohol. So this was the kind of bond that we had in those days.
You're listening to Stark Talk on BBC Radio Scotland. I'm Edie Stark and I'm with the singer-songwriter Jackie Leven. Did you have ambitions for Doll by Doll at that time to rule the world?
No, we thought we were very good because we were very good. And the band came up at the same time as punk. We thought some of the punk bands were great, but we thought a load of it was complete rubbish as well. And a lot of the aggravation and the violence which they depicted, we thought of as being cartoonish.
But on the other hand, you could be very aggressive and
yeah,
violent.
we thought our
you
music...
had a reputation for being pretty nasty.
We thought our music was genuinely violent music, violence that came from things being very seriously and genuinely wrong.
So was this supposed to be cathartic violence?
That wouldn't be a word that we'd be entirely familiar with at the time, but I would now accept that as a description, yes.
So it was good for you?
It would have been good for us if we weren't drinking far too much and taking drugs and stuff.
Well, you were a big LSD band, weren't you?
Yeah, and I was the main proponent of that, although Dave, my drummer, wasn't far behind. I had a deeply held belief in the power of LSD. One of my favourite books to this day is a book called The Human Encounter with Death by Stanislav Grof and Joan Halifax, in which, before LSD became an outlawed drug, they gave it to a lot of poor black people dying in Baltimore, dying of cancer. And the book is a series of descriptions of the revelatory experiences that these dying people had, taken down verbatim, but with commentary by Groff and Halifax. And it's an extremely beautiful book. So, as I say, I had a properly held belief in the therapeutic value of the drug.
You were a hippie.
I was not a hippie. I may have been a beatnik, but I was never a hippie. And in fact, the one thing I did like about the punks was how much they did not like the hippies, because a lot of hippiedom lacked the tension of which I was speaking earlier. You have to have this tension in life.
Why did Doll by Doll break up?
Well, I think we just got extremely tired relatively quickly, because the shows were very, very demanding psychically and physically.
You weren't touring with people like Sting, didn't you? And Kirsty MacColl?
We'd end up doing TV shows in strange places like Munich with those kinds of people. But we toured with people like Hawkwind and Devo.
Oh, Hawkwind were really hardcore.
Yeah, they were. They hated us. In fact, they threw us off the tour. In fact, Devo threw us off the tour as well.
Why?
It just wasn't what they expected. They didn't expect the act. I remember Devo got told we were no longer on the tour. So I went and had a word with their American manager. And he said, listen, we were expecting you to be a young punk combo who weren't thinking too hard.
Doll by Doll broke up. You went solo. You were recording your first solo album after the band broke up. And you were savagely attacked when you were walking home after one of the recordings.
Yeah, I foolishly got very drunk in a studio in which I was recording, and I decided I was going to walk home. So everyone I was recording with said, Jackie, you can't walk home from here. It doesn't matter how big you are, you can't walk home. But I was recklessly drunk and I'll do what I want. So off I went. And the people I was working with after a while went, no, this is not on. So they decided to come and force me to get in the car. And they came up and found me being attacked by a bunch of guys in an unprovoked way. I mean, I was just walking home and got mugged, basically. And,
what had happened to you?
Well, I nearly got strangled to death. So then I couldn't sing or really even speak for a long time, the best part of a year. And then after that, I began to get a bit better.
But they could have killed you?
I think they very possibly would have killed me. And I can remember thinking, when this guy had a hold of me, I can remember thinking, I'm going to die here.
Were you grateful to have survived when you had no voice?
Well, it was certainly a challenge, because I couldn't really talk to anyone. People began to relate to me as if I had a mental health problem.
Were you depressed, though?
I became extremely depressed, yeah.
And you'd been depressed before because you had thought about committing suicide before when you were on tour with the band.
Yeah, I had. But there was an intensity to wanting to kill yourself when I was like on tour with a band, which in a way was kind of useful.
How could it be useful?
Because I didn't. I somehow
You
recovered.
could then write about it.
Well, I could write about it, and I also made some kind of recovery and got back in the world. And to be honest, the band were great as well, and very helpful, and because they had their own problems. But with this thing, after the attack, there's a thing that Wittgenstein said, which is, when you stare into the abyss stares into you. Thanks very much, Wittgenstein. And that's the kind of experience I was having, because no matter how bad things had got, the fact was I was a brilliant singer, I was a brilliant stage artist, and I knew how to make records. Women liked me. There was a lot that was not wrong, although I hadn't managed to notice that until this thing happened. But all of a sudden I just thought, what am I going to do now?
You lost your falsetto voice, which was stupendous. You lost that forever. So you can't sing some of the songs that Doll by Doll sang.
I can't. I can sing them if I sing them lower, but then I sound like Matt Monro on Serious Drugs, and it's not the same, because once again it's the tension in the songs that makes the songs work, and it's still hard when people shout out for the songs, because the songs are great.
When the neon universe was winking to an end, taxi drivers yawned from Earl's Court to the Strand. I thought of you, decorating your new home. I know they say love is blind, but if your heart was touching mine.
The way that you self-medicated, to use that rather trendy expression, was to take heroin.
Heroin is sometimes called the classic drug of despair. It was to deal with the pain of despair and to deal with actual physical pain as well that I turned to heroin. And I found it a useful drug for a while, but I didn't embrace it as a lifestyle like junkies do. For me it was a tool, an overpowering tool and an overwhelming tool. Which
Did it beat you?
It did beat me, yeah. And in the end I became a servant of the drug. And there came a day when I thought, I really don't want to be doing this anymore. My girlfriend of the time and myself were watching a lot of jazz bands and people having fun on narrowboats on the Regent's Canal in London. And my girlfriend looked over the railings at where all this was happening, and there was kids and dogs and candy floss. And she said, "What are these people doing?" And all I said was, "They're having fun." And when I said those words, there was a thing changed between us, and we knew that we had to sort this problem out, which we then did, using things like traditional 5-element acupuncture.
You started up the Core Trust, which is a drug addiction rehabilitation centre for people who want to take this holistic approach. You were very involved with it. Princess Diana was the patron. She asked you to sing to her, I believe?
Di really came to love the charity.
Who died?
Di, yes.
Such close terms.
My mate Di. And she decided she was happy to do us a once-a-year charity lunch. On the first occasion that we were going to have one of these lunches, which was very much the great and good, and suddenly she said, "I understand you used to be a singer." And I was really annoyed. I said, "I didn't used to be a singer, I am a singer." So she said, "Well, sing something now." So I said, "Well, we can't do that, ma'am, we're already 5 minutes late." She said, "I can do what I want. I am your princess. I command that you sing right now."
Sounds quite flirtatious.
It was very flirtatious and very sexy when she said that she was my princess and must be obeyed. It was quite a free song. So I felt obliged to sing, and so I credit her with the beginning of me thinking, I can do this again, because I wasn't doing anything at all at that time.
You came back with the solo album, The Mystery of Love is Greater Than the Mystery of Death. And a certain Deborah Greenwood heard that album and wrote you a fan letter.
She did, yes.
And later became your wife. How Mills and Boon is that?
Extremely Mills and Boon, and at the time, because it was a fantastic album, and I did get a lot of letters about it, but I just thought, what a lovely letter, and I just kept it on my desk.
But she came along to one of your concerts.
She did.
Sat down with her friend who had insisted that you both go along. The friend, Debbie told me this, had to go off because her boyfriend wasn't well, leaving her on her own.
Yes. There's a very funny moment where we were then talking, and this is entirely correct what she said. We're being very polite with each other, and I worked out that she was the woman who'd written the letter. Unfortunately, in the background, a Scottish friend of mine was shouting, "Go on, Jackie, she's gagging for it!" which didn't entirely help, or maybe it did.
Well, 10 years later, you're still together.
We are together, yes, I'm very happy.
Because, you know, not all of your relationships have lasted. There is the story of your girlfriend going off with the Dalai Lama's bodyguard.
Yeah.
You really couldn't make these things up, Jackie.
No, you couldn't. Or you'd have to ask yourself serious questions if you did. That was very hard to take.
Is she still with the Dalai Lama's bodyguard?
I'm glad to say no. He was a tough guy. He was a Dalai Lama's bodyguard, so I thought, well, that's one you've just got to chalk down to experience.
We are running out of time, unfortunately. We have had but a glimpse of your life, which has certainly been eventful. Will there be a day when you're filling out stadiums?
I don't think so, and I'm not sure that it's now what I'd want, because I've got a rapport and a kind of loyalty to the sort of person that's worked hard to stay with me and enjoy and appreciate my music for what I think are good reasons, which really, really matters to me. I certainly need a few more fans, but I think that might take care of itself in the fullness of time.
Ever hopeful.
That's right.
Jackie Leven, thank you very much indeed.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Edie.
I took her picture from the